take up too much time. I want to two things before I say anything really. I want a favour, and I'll explain why I'm late. And the favour is this. Over this last week, all the major corporations, the shops and all the rest, have been producing their videos for Christmas. Some of you may have seen them. And yesterday, John Lewis produced its video, which is beautiful. It starts off with a bear and a hare on its back, hare with ears, walking through spring woods in friendly calm, etc. Then the snow starts. The bear finds a cave. It goes to sleep. The hare goes off, and it leaves the bear a Christmas present under an alarm clock. The alarm clock wakes the bear up, and the bear comes out, and for the first time in its life, it sees a Christmas tree. And it is the most moving, almost Disney-esque type cartoon you've seen in years. It's beautiful. So someone tweeted it around, so I simply put a comment up on YouTube, which was, just give your workers, your cleaners who are employed by a contractor, and all those others who service the store, a living wage this Christmas. Make their Christmas. Wait for it. I've had every fucking troll in the country coming at me. It's almost as though I've had an inappropriate relationship with Rudolph. Unbelievable. It is unbelievable. You know, you spoiled the Christmas for my children. You spoiled Christmas. What I've been really grateful for is an act of solidarity on your part today. Is go onto YouTube and tweet, etc., and just put your comment on. Because all I said was make sure your contractors are paying their workers, the cleaners mainly, a living wage, and recognise the IWW have been doing the campaign over the last year. Only 2 weeks ago, Chris Ford was thrown out of a John Lewis shop in Oxford Street as a result of the campaign. We've been outside there now for 18 months. We've had trade unionists victimised. We've had people thrown out of the shops. We've had people threatened. Just please go on YouTube and put your comment up, a simple comment, just as an act of solidarity for me, to demonstrate, at least for my grandchildren, I'm not a bastard. The second thing is, this is why I'm late, and this epitomises what we're talking about. I have a Feltham Detention Centre near to me, and near my constituency. It's a hard place. It's a tough place with kids in there who've got all sorts of problems and issues. When they come out, they used to be provided with social services support, often placed in supportive hostels in the transitional period if they can't go back to their families. What happens now is most of that has been privatised, and what happens now is privatised companies come along and they lease properties, a lot of them, about 5 in my constituency, ordinary houses in an ordinary street, and they put the kids into those properties, and that's fine. But those kids, a lot of them have got real problems and they need supervision. So last night, yet again, in one of those properties, the police were called out twice, and I've been dealing with it this morning. Next to them, next to one of the properties, is a friend of mine who's a childminder. And she's a caring person. She doesn't want the kids kicked out or anything like that. She just wants a member of staff there to supervise them. They only put a member of staff in for 3 nights of the week because of costs and it impacts upon their property. And again, the neighbour is not someone who said that one of the kids was stabbed last time. She brought the kid into the house to treat them until the police arrived and it was dealt with. That's just doesn't it epitomises everything about privatisation. How people suffer, the most vulnerable in our society, but how people are making outrageous profits. That's why I was late this morning, and I apologise for that, trying to do that. Very briefly, I just want to say 2 things. One is this. I think we're on the edge of one of the most dangerous political moments that we've experienced in generations. And the second is, as a result of that, I think there's no time for timidity within the Labour Party or anywhere else. And I think that's why this initiative today is critically important to us. And that's why I and the LSC and all the others have supported it, and it's linked up with the People's Assembly. Why do I think it's a critical moment? Very briefly, it's because of this. Most of us thought and were taught that we were on a linear progression of material improvement for our class and the extension of democracy throughout history. We thought it would be maybe a few ups and downs, but at least a smooth path of progression, where our lives would improve and there'd be an extension of democracy across society. And to be frank, since the foundation of the trade union movement, the labour movement, it's largely been that way. But what happened under Thatcher and Major, and I have to say also under Blair, is that what happened is the brakes were being put on that gradual improvement in our lives, both democratically and materially. But in this recent period, they've used the economic recession, we've discussed this time and time again, there's no use going over it again, they've used it to halt completely that progress, and then to start driving it into reverse. They're using the economic recession to drive it into reverse. We've discussed this. You know, the undermining of the welfare state, settlement of Attlee, council housing going, privatisation of the NHS, privatisation of education, effectively turning education into a commodity to be charged for, undermining of full employment, undermining of trade union rights, undermining of civil liberties, and the withdrawal of legal aid. We've discussed this at length, but now I think we're just on the edge of something much more dangerous. We're on the edge of a society, of creation of a society, which is brutal, absolutely brutal. I think we're on the edge of civilization, to be frank. A society in which this historic block between, it's the old Gramsciist concept of this historic block between finance capital and the patrician Tory elite, using all the mechanisms available to them in terms of ideology through the media, a brutal society in which now we hunt the poor. We hunt them down and we target them. We target specific categories of the poor, the most vulnerable, people with disabilities. We use ATAS not just to degrade them, but to make them vulnerable to attack in wider society. We've seen hate crime against disabled people escalate dramatically in this recent period. We hunt the poor and we target the young. We force them into workfare. Work for nothing. We had a word for that before. It was called slavery. That's what it is. And we hunt the most vulnerable. And we've seen in the latest immigration bill, to be frank, the most racist piece of legislation we've seen in decades. It's the introduction, effectively, of almost pass laws and passport system that they saw under apartheid. So if you're black, a person of colour, or you look slightly foreign, when you go in a bank to open an account, you have to have your documents with you. Or if you want to rent a property, you have to have documents with you. And when you go for health treatment, they'll want to check whether or not you were here under a visa and whether you paid or not the extra money for the visa. Do you know, they even wanted, and we leaked this as a result of the leak through PCS, they even wanted at one point in time teachers checking on the nationality status of their pupils. Now we blocked that with the exposure, but don't think they're not going to come back for it at some stage in the future. It's a brutal society, and it gets worse. The introduction of the criminalisation of squatting. And I have to say this, Chaparamuna coming out for further criminalisation of squatting is unacceptable within a Labour movement. Undermining of civil liberties more subtly these times. Yes, we've had the kettling, we've had the brutality, but if you attended the Defend the Right to Protest conference last weekend, you will have heard people of what they're saying now. Mass arrests on demonstrations that never result in a court case, but that place conditions on people under caution for months, so they're not able then to participate in their democratic ability to demonstrate or participate in trade union action. And it was interesting that when they arrested people on the fracking demonstration at Balcombe, they used the anti-trade union laws to do it. Yeah. And that, I think, is a reflection of what they're expecting to use in the future. I think we're on the edge of an incredibly dangerous moment. We're tippling into a society. Lasky said it, basically. Lasky said very, very clearly, don't expect fascism to come in this country with the strutting of a dictator with medals and all the rest of it. It will come as a result of the slow erosion of democratic rights and civil liberties into a form of brutal, conservative authoritarianism. That's what we're on the edge of. So therefore, I'll finish on this. There's no time for timidity. That's how dangerous it is. We've got to be equally courageous and brave and determined. And that means two things. One is making clear to people, yes, there is an alternative. But the alternative that we're putting forward has got to be realistic and it's got to satisfy real needs. So I'm pleased with what we've seen already in terms of Ed Miliband's movement. On housing, it's critical that we commit ourselves to build more houses. Of course it is. But I tell you, that won't be enough. In my constituency, we need rent controls. Yeah. We need to control rent. I'm pleased what happened on energy in terms of the energy freeze. But what do? They increase their prices before, they found they increased prices afterwards. So Sodom, bring them back into public ownership. Our role should be to move the agenda each time. And to be frank, we should never ever allow it to happen again, that this union at Grangemouth gets threatened in the way it does. We should have said then, we'll take it into public control and give it workers' control of that site if necessary. We've had enough of being bullied by capital. It's us, it's time to respond as well. And I tell you also, in terms of welfare benefits, we want a living wage for those in work, but we want a living wage for those on benefits as well. And we want to scrap that also, and all the disability tests and all the rest of it, and we want to restore dignity to those who can't work or are unable to work. They contribute as much to our society as anyone else who wakes up in the morning and goes to work as well, because they care for others, and they care for themselves, and they contribute to our wider society. I think on every occasion now, when the Labour leadership moves to a safe position, because we've made it safe, we then push it further. That's our job as an assembly like this. Finally, this is dangerous times require dangerous and courageous actions as well. That means we have to act. People thought that when we got to the depth of the recession, that's when people react. Actually, that's not when people react. It's usually, if you look at the 30s and before, it's when the recession starts to lift and they feel they're not part of it. That's when real anger builds up. So there's a moment of opportunity now of this next 12 to 18 months when I think anger will build again, and we've got to be there to mobilise it. Mobilise every form of industrial action we possibly can. And people think there's a quietude at the moment. No, there isn't. UCU, NUT, PCS, RMT, people are out there on strike on a regular basis. We should be part of that movement. That's why this assembly has been brought together. But also we've got to recognise the Labour Party was founded as a social movement, a direct action movement. We've got to turn the Labour Party back into a direct action movement. So whenever there's a demonstration, closing down Westminster Bridge the other night was joyful, to be honest. And when people burnt their energy bills, it was terrific. It's a pity. No, I won't go into arsenal tax. But it was an example to others that they have the courage to demonstrate. Now, the media never covered it, but the social media did, and word of mouth did, and gave confidence to others to come forward. So I just say this. This is an incredibly dangerous period that we've got to rise up to. This is most probably the biggest challenge our movement has faced in generations and maybe throughout our history. So we've got to rise to that challenge. We need courage, determination, and we need to learn the lesson of 2 centuries of solidarity. Together, we're strong if we're determined and we know where we're going. Solidarity.